Welcome to WeatherBrains, episode number 662. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. This is the pre-show, magical time of this program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally we say very outrageous things. And it is for September 24th. Fall is here. The equinox is past. We have more night than day. And obviously, I'm rambling, Bill. Help me.
I was trying to think of what our 10 greatest controversial shows on WeatherBrains ever were. Well, what were our greatest hits, James?
Is this going to be a controversy? Do you know something I don't know here? Is this going to go down the tubes?
This should be a nice, calm show, but it's always fun to stir up a little controversy. I guess mobile homes and tornadoes. That's one.
Episode 404.
Oh, yeah, that one goes without saying, doesn't it?
Famous episode 404. Hey, tap your mic.
Yeah, I got a problem here. Hold on. I'm not sure what the problem is.
You might be using your
it's my AirPods.
Pods. I mean, it sounds okay, but it's not your quality
I don't know
Heil mic.
It should be picking it up, and it's not.
It's been a weird day, man. So my wife's car broke down. That's always fun.
Oh, no.
But it broke down at a really good place. It broke down in front of Oak Mountain Elementary School, which is like my world. Those are my people. So I was coming back from an elementary school, and it just worked out. Needs an alternator and a bad electrical system shut down.
Roads as you drive back roads to Alabama, James. How many times have you broken down like that?
Not many. I drive these, Toyotas, and they run forever. The one I've got now has got 210,000 miles, and it's just getting broken in. It's just getting good. Now, if you change the oil and, take care of it, they'll run forever. I have really not had a lot of car issues in my life. I did have one back in the spring. I was coming back, oddly enough, from Greenville, Alabama, which is where I'm from. I went down there to speak to Greenville Middle School, and was noticing a low oil light. This was a station vehicle. This is not mine. This was a station vehicle. And I'm thinking, what's the deal with the low oil? I mean, and the oil pressure was low and everything. And by the time I got to Clanton, it was starting to smoke. I'm thinking, oh yeah, so I'm going to burn this sucker up. But I just drove it slowly back, and turned out there was a leak or something. They had just changed the oil, but apparently there was some little leak, and it was coming out. But I did not burn up the engine. They said 5 more miles it would have burned up. That's not a good look when your station vehicle burns up on the side of the road and your weather guy's standing right by it. And Bill just hung up on me. So, all right. Maybe it'll just be me in a 90-minute tirade tonight or something. But no, I've not had that many car issues. But anyway, the way it works, typically during the week, I'm in a station vehicle anyway, going to schools. I was in one today. I'll be in one tomorrow. And so she's got mine, and hers should be ready tomorrow, and we'll figure it out. But the worst place to break down is when you're like on an interstate, or this major thoroughfare, and you're stopped in the middle lane, and there could be bad scenarios. But where she broke down was very convenient, and it was on a hill. And so when I got there, I let it kind of put it neutral and got it down the hill, and they came and took it away. Bill, you okay? You hung up on us. Uh-oh. He is frozen.
Well,
this is not good.
So James, what does it mean? What the Windows, you call it the blue screen of death. What do you call it in Mac? Because it just happened to me.
That's called a kernel panic.
I just had a kernel panic.
If you see it go to where it's got a bunch of different languages, and
that's it. I thought it was the Ruskies.
You just survived a kernel panic, which doesn't happen that often, but it can. So,
well, as soon as I plugged in my USB, adapter, blew up.
It can happen.
All right,
Kernel
we need to
panics
get-
happen for a variety of reasons, but all you start it up and it's fine. It's
All right.
but
We need
that
to
is the
invite
that is the
Jay
Mac
later.
equivalent of the blue screen of death.
Sounds like a
so-
new computer. I think
I've
I need a
invited
new
like
computer
everybody.
now. Just
Well,
you
there
and
you
me
go.
and Jay Prater, huh?
I guess that's all right.
Have you invited Jay
So
already?
no, I don't have his contact stuff.
Here, I'll put it in the text for you.
Okay,
I figured you just knew that off the top of your head.
I might be able to put it in here, but give me his email address and I'll.
Yeah, he probably would pop up. But
Now, does he work? Does he work nights?
Yeah, but he's on for tonight. So
Okay, and
we did the
I've
test
got,
walking through the convention bureau office today with my cell phone. My CVB meeting went 2 hours today, so I missed my test call with him.
just so you'll know, we have a new format on the late news tonight. I've got to be in there a little early.
Yeah, well, let's finish early. I'm tired and got an early day tomorrow, so that'd be fine with me. He probably has. He might have to leave a little early too. I bet.
Yeah, if he's doing it 10 o'clock.
Let's
it's
ask
like,
him. There
oh,
he is. There's the famous Jay Prater.
Howdy.
What time do you have to be out of here tonight, Jay?
You know what? Fortunately, it's not a very complex weather pattern, so I can, probably hang until 9:30 at the latest if necessary.
But they're going to be wind gusts tomorrow at 35 miles an hour. How
Yeah,
would
that's
that not
called
carry you in the first
Days
block?
that's called days that end in Y here.
So Jay, do they lead with weather every night on the late news there?
One television station does because it's a sponsored element. Most of us, including mine, we don't unless it's deservedly so.
They've gotten to where they lead with weather about every other night, but they're doing. There's a whole new format in here tonight, and me being who I am, I've not even paid attention to it, which is horrible. But they told me about it like last week, and I've forgotten everything they told me. So I need to go reread the playbook here. But I know the name is different. I think they've called it the news at 10, but now it's not the news at 10 anymore. It's the something. So I need to figure out what they call it, and then they hit me in the first. They usually hit me in the first segment somewhere, but then in the weather, for years and years, I have shown video and photographs from social media, and like today, I've got hundreds of just creepy clouds. There's some very interesting stuff today. But now they want to move that down to the bottom of the newscast. And for the weather, they just want me to come out and talk about. Now, if there's active weather, yeah, you used to do radar. But if there's nothing going on, they want me just to talk about the next big thing. No more data dump. And good evening. Welcome to our television viewers. It is 30 minutes after the hour, and we're about to start this program, WeatherBrains. Jay, nothing like being back on TV in Birmingham, huh?
Absolutely. I tell you what, man, I can't believe that I've spent more of my life out of Birmingham than in it. But I miss home.
Well, we are on the way we do this. We simulcast this on our digital weather channel. So we're on the cable, systems. They take this thing live at 30 after the hour. I think we're all on Central Time here, so it's 8:30. So 40 seconds ago, we just went live on the television side. So you are now back on Birmingham television.
Well, fantastic. Now I'm going to get a call and hear about some kind of non-compete thing that I've broken now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
But there you go.
You were on some Sinclair channel in Alabama. Who owns that station, Jay?
We are owned by Lockwood Broadcast Group.
I've never heard of that. Wow.
And it's very small. Cool. We used to be owned by Gray Television, which, just is in the process of acquiring Raycom, which owns one of your competitors there. Gray had to divest us when they acquired Shirts, which was a family-owned company. There was another shirt station here, the CBS. So they divested us, kept the other station. We got flipped out to Lockwood Broadcast Group, which is based out of Virginia. And it's a mom and pop, which is a double-edged sword. There's no Wall Street pressure anymore. There's no top-down, here's your format, here's your graphics package, here's what you're going to do. But at the same time, there's no picking up the phone and asking for a graphic from the graphics hub either.
Yeah. No, we were a mom and pop channel for a long time, the Albritton family, and
Right.
it was great. But hey, we often are guilty about not getting the good stuff on the actual recorded podcast here. So let me get these recorders going here. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Forget the volume down. Hang on. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 662 for the 24th of September. Do you remember the 21st night of September, Bill Murray? Do you remember the 21st night of September? What song was that? Who did that song?
The night
Do you
Chicago
recall?
died? Was that the night
No.
Chicago died? No.
No, it was the song September by Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh, why did that? Well, I don't remember it having the 21st in it. Was that what it said?
Do you remember the 21st night of September?
I never knew that's what they were saying. I've listened to that song.
That's what they're singing. So
know
anyway, Jay.
Yes.
Did you know that?
Did you know the song September by Earth, Wind, and Fire mentioned the
absolutely.
21st night of September?
Are you kidding? I was a very big listener to WENN FM 107.7 growing up. So yes, Quincy Jones, Earth, Wind, and Fire, absolutely. But I got to admit, I remember the song September, but I didn't remember the date reference in the song.
Exactly. There you go. That's what I said.
I mean, only I would be the guy that remembers that. Do you remember the 21st night of September? Love was changing the minds of pretenders while chasing the clouds away.
I never knew any of those words. That's great.
Oh, what a great song.
Night.
Yeah, if it was the 21st night of September, I'd play it, but we'd get kicked off YouTube. I got a note today. One of our YouTube channels got kicked off of monetization or something. We broke some rule.
One of the ABC ones?
I don't know. I need to dig and see what we did here. But anyway, listen.
Scott Martin did in his video on Saturday.
It happened. It happened Saturday. Did he play any music or anything?
I don't know. I didn't know. The KS Services video has some music in it, but I don't know if it was copyright or not.
No, that's been running for a while.
The algorithms that those properties are going to work, and when you're going to get nailed with something, it's all automated. There's no human looking over all this stuff.
Yeah, we got hit this weekend. But anyway, let's just see here. So obviously we're shy tonight, and we are going to have to wrap this up a little. This might be the shortest WeatherBrains ever, because Jay's got to do the 10 o'clock weather, and we'll introduce Jay formally here in a second. I've got to do the late weather. Bill, he's got a hangover or something. He needs to get to bed early. So
it's all those Hooters beer nights you accuse me of.
50-cent beer night at Hooters. So. But let's go around the horn and see who's so Kim. We know Kim's situation. She's on maternity leave. Dr. Cloco McLean is out on maternity leave, and she'll be back when she gets back. And everybody's happy and healthy, and we're very happy for her. Rick Smith sent a note, said he's out tonight. Nate Johnson sent a note. He is out because of his anniversary, his 12th anniversary tonight.
Congratulations, Nate.
But Nate was here last week on the Hurricane Florence show, so that was great having him here last week. Aubrey, I think, is still underwater in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So we're not so sure about her status. And again, Brian Peters is out on medical leave. So Kevin is still taking care of his dad. We've gone through a rough stretch here, but Bill Murray, we're here. I will let. That's right. The Three Stooges. So, Bill, introduce our third member of the panel here. Go.
And right when you do that, my internet starts to get flaky there, James. But James, should it concern me that I couldn't hear the music that you played? I don't want to miss any of these great sound drops later.
Oh boy, I'm glad you told me that. Yeah. We'll here. Let me test one thing out here. See if you hear this. No, you don't hear that. Okay. I'll work on it while you introduce Jay. Yeah.
Well, we're really honored tonight to have Chief Meteorologist from KAKE in Wichita, Jay Prater, who's a good friend of Birmingham, longtime resident here. He mentioned in the pre-show that he's been away longer than he lived here. Jay, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. I was in Birmingham just a week and a half ago. So my parents still live there. So I occasionally sneak in to town unannounced, try to do it on the DL. I'm still in the quest for replicating the Gus's hot dog of old back when they were on Oxmoor Road and there's several places named Gus in Birmingham. So my quest for the original Gus's hot dog slowly continues every time I'm back in the Birmingham.
Now, the new Gus has just appeared on some cooking channel show, didn't it, James? Didn't I see that a couple of weeks ago?
You know, and people listening have no idea what we're talking about here, but yeah, Gus's hot dogs. I want to say, I know one of the guys that ran one of those. I got to see if it's Gus's, the one I'm thinking about here. Anyway,
I'm sorry. My apologies for going
we're going down a total rat hole here, but that's okay.
So Jay, how did you get into weather? What got you interested in it in one of those Alabama years way back when?
April 3rd and 4th, 1974. Period.
Really, I didn't think you would be old enough to remember that, Jay.
I was in 4th grade and terrified at night listening to WAPI AM 1070, because you remember it was part of Channel 13 at that time, and listening to
AM 1070.
Yeah. And Wendell Harris came on and started with the original tornado warnings in eastern Mississippi, and then followed up with what became the Guin storm and all that. And that night terrified me. And I decided I want to learn more about the weather. And then 3 years later, the Smithfield tornado of 77, my father was at a meeting in Decatur, driving back on I-65 to Birmingham. And he comes home and he goes, hey, just north of town, I noticed all these cars were flipped over on the interstate. He came just behind the F5 Smithfield storm in 77. And that was a really active period for me. And I decided I want to learn more about the weather.
Yeah, that was the night I became unterrified of the weather, April 3rd, 1974, because I was in a panic that entire night. And I was listening to, James, help me here, WFMH out of Coleman, I think, had an FM. Is that
yes,
right
WFMH had a 100,000 watt FM radio station. But what's funny, back in the mid 70s, most people listened to AM. Yeah. And on FM, they dumped these beautiful music formats and these weird talk show formats. But yeah, they had a 100,000 watt blowtorch, WFMH at 101.1.
Well, when the Jasper tornado hit Coleman, it knocked them off the air, and they had to broadcast from the transmitter. And so they were literally, Jay, I don't know if you remember this or not, but they were literally sitting on the roof of the building that the transmitter next to the tower, and were watching the storm at Guin, a couple of hours later. And
wow, I was since I was in 4th grade, my parents weren't going to let me out of the bedroom, and I was lucky to listen to Wendell Harris on 1070, because you got to remember, he was also the anchor at WAPI on Channel 13 at the time. So he was running back and forth between the television studio and the radio studios at that point. And it's, small circle life can be. I wound up working at AM 1070 WAPI at one time. So it's always interesting how when you grow up, you wind up sometimes doing the things you did as a kid, but as an adult.
Well, I remember that night clearly, too, because WDJC here was Contemporary Christian station, then is now. And they had an outstanding core of DJs that would rip and read right off the weather wire. And so, knowing that day was going to be huge, I mean, because, back then, you paid attention to the weather really closely from whatever source you could get it. And the Today Show that morning before I went to school had the big Skywarn map, showing basically, what part of 13 states, in a severe weather outlook. And I knew that was bad. And so, we had warnings during the afternoon. We had a tornado in Concord in western Jefferson County. Yep. And, you keep thinking this thing's over, and it just keeps coming. And, that night was the last night I was ever scared of it, for sure.
What I'm so disappointed is I had this little small blue Panasonic cassette tape recorder, and every time the EBS tone would go off, I would start the tape. And for years, I had an audio record of WAPI's coverage of that night. And over the years, I have misplaced that tape. But I remember I would go back and listen to that thing over and over again.
Yeah, all out search now for Jay's tape, because we need that, the lost tape.
I would give good money to find that tape. I mean, I would love to hear that. And Mike's story on 1974, and we've done shows in the super outbreak before. I was a senior in high school. I graduated from high school that May 1974. And my hobby then was amateur radio. And I also worked at a commercial radio station in Tuscaloosa called WTBC. But that night, I was the net control for the West Alabama emergency net on 146.82, the repeater in Tuscaloosa. And of course, we had people check in from Fayette and from Reform and all over Tuscaloosa County. And Tuscaloosa County kind of they didn't have any issues that night, but we could also monitor traffic from the repeater in Jasper and some of these other places, and it became obvious that we had a real problem. I didn't get to hear any of the radio broadcast that night or television stuff. I was focused on the ham radio side, and they gave me 3 days off from high school to go volunteer with my ham radio gear, because understand, and this is a really hard concept to grasp, but in 1974, there were no cell phones. People today cannot even imagine a time where this was the case.
Not even nothing.
No. And so anyway, the bottom line is I saw things that would change my life during that whole time frame. It was crazy.
So I can believe that. Being a fourth grader, I wasn't as aware that that day was going to set up. So it wasn't until it started to unfold that I became aware of what's going on. And that's what really scared the heck out of me. And I started, checking out the books at the library. And that was it. That was when I first said, you know what, I want to learn more about the atmosphere, and started studying. And it's still funny that I can't believe I actually do this for a living. I mean, this is something I wanted to do as a kid, and I am so thankful and grateful that I get to have a profession that I dreamed about as a kid. I still can't believe I get to do this.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Jay, do you remember those C.F. Boone books that were written about, that had all the pictures in them from the tornado outbreak? You probably checked that one out of the library a few thousand times.
Oh, yeah, and also the Time Life series on weather and building your own weather stations, like building your own simple barometers by taking a tin can and putting a tube on it, evacuating it by heating it up, and then putting it down in liquid and letting it suck up the liquid. And so you kind of had to do it yourself barometer at that point. But it really took off for me. Luckily, my freshman year in high school, the new kid moved into town, and we kind of became friends. And I found out later on that his father was the news director at WBRC television. So next thing you know, I get a chance to hang out at a TV station, and I was absolutely hooked. My sophomore paper became television weather at that point.
And so who were you working with back then, Jay? Who was the meteorologist?
Well, James was on Channel 13 at the time, and Mike Royer was at Channel 6. And, I'm sure James doesn't remember, but as a high school student, I actually called him for my sophomore paper, and he was gracious enough to interview me over the telephone. And Mike did the same thing. And then when I mentioned I went to school with John Hayes Jr., he was like, well, why don't you come up to the TV station and see how we do it? I'm there. So made the long, winding drive atop Red Mountain, past Channel 13 to the storied columns of WBRC Channel 6, and was a kid in a candy store.
That was pretty amazing. So, James, go ahead.
I was going to say, Jay, my first impression of Channel 6, I was a child desperately wanting to be on Cousin Cliff, which was on 13, but he was always booked up. Wound up being on Benny Carl on Channel 6. This is before y'all's time. But that was my first time walking in that building, and my jaw just dropped. I'm thinking, wow. Now I was, pretty young back then, but I'm thinking this place is kind of awesome. And I would wind up going to work there in 1989 after all those years at, Channel 13. But that is a pretty cool place up there. I'll say this. I've been away for 22 years, but it was a marvelous place to work and a pretty magical experience. But I didn't know that connection with John Hayes. That's interesting stuff. So when did you start working at Channel 13, Jay? I mean, what was your path from just going to Channel 6 and making that visit to working at 13?
Well, after that visit to Channel 6, I was kind of a thorn in Mike Royer's side. So I'm sure if you ever talk with him, he'll remember what a pain it was. He would kind of give me an unofficial internship. So I was going up to Channel 6 quite frequently and getting the big black marker out and drawing on that plexiglass map, and also using the cleaner to clean it off. So he got to hang out with me, and that was great. But then, hey, it's time to go to school, and so away I went. And I'm not gonna. I went down to Auburn University thinking that, I'm going to do this ROTC thing, and the Air Force is going to teach me meteorology, so I'll study a little radio and television. Well, at that time, the Air Force really didn't want more meteorologists. This was during the Reagan era, and they wanted deputy missile launch commanders, which are people that sit underground in the Dakotas with 2 keys in a safe and a sidearm, waiting to turn keys and launch a ballistic missile. And I thought, not really the career path I had in mind. So luckily at this time, I said, you know what, before I can get to television, radio is theater of the mind, it's ad lib. So let's work at radio for a little bit. And I worked at WAPI, AM 1070, and also a little stint on I-95, which was the FM side, formerly 95 Rock. And weekend job came open at WVTN. And I applied for it as a joke just to get the experience. Tom Roberts hired me. And Mississippi State was starting its program, so I immediately enrolled in Mississippi State. And that's how it started.
And that was with Jerry Tracy, right?
Yeah, Jerry had just been hired, and because it was Larry Nobles, and Jerry had replaced Larry Nobles, and the weekend position came open, and I just went up there for an interview, and just to get some experience. And Tom Roberts offered me the job, and I was like, "Wow, okay." And fortunately, going back to school and finish out Mississippi State was awesome.
Yeah, we have some very similar background, Jay, along the way. And I used to hang out with Jerry. Jerry was really the reason that I got my first job in 1991 on television over at Channel 42, because I would bring Jerry dinner every Wednesday night and sit and pick his brain about forecast discussions. And he taught me enough in 2 years. I still have the notebook to this day to be halfway credible on television.
Hey, Jerry was an incredible mentor. I couldn't have gotten luckier. And then again, to be able to work in your own hometown for your worst job, or your first job, is just incredible. And I always will be thankful for that. For some reason in my mind, even though it's been so long ago and I was only at BTM for a short period of time, it just seems like I was there for so much longer. Mm-hmm. But I was there when management brought Mike Royer over from WBRC to WVTM. So here it is. I get to work as a coworker now with the person who used to let me, draw on his maps when I was in high school. And obviously that's when WBRC did a very wise thing and found this gentleman that was working at a radio station in Tuscaloosa, or Demopolis, I believe at that time, and said, I think this person needs to be back on television presenting weather. And needless to say, then James made the winding drive up the hill to the building with the columnists next to him.
Yeah, and the backstory on that, for those that don't know, I was on a fast track when I was at 13. They were owned by the Los Angeles Times broadcast group. It was called Times Mirror Broadcasting. And for some reason, they had kind of this odd deal where they would move people around. And, it's a lot of businesses do that, but that's typically not the way it works in television, because, you gain equity in a market, you understand the people and the culture, and if they move you, you got to start over. Nobody knows who you are. But in 1984, they decided that they had to have me at the largest station they owned, which was in Dallas. So in my 20s, I was working at Channel 4 in Dallas as the main weeknight weather guy. And again, I'm glad I went. I established some friendships that to this day have paid off. Brilliant people in the weather enterprise, and I'm very thankful for that. But my wife and I just felt like we needed to come home. It was a time where the unions out there were fighting with each other, and I had no interest in being in some big market TV station. I've never been that kind of guy. I'm a homeboy. So we just decided we wanted to come home. Our families were here, and it was a strain. We had a brand new baby, and it was just hard. So I'm thinking, well, look, I'm in a top 10 market. I'm done. I mean, I've done all I can do in television. So we bought a small market radio station. Dave Baird, who I did news with for years here. Tom Stipe, he produces the University of Alabama Sports Networks, and me, we bought a radio AM/FM combo in Demopolis, Alabama. So I literally went from Dallas, the main weather guy, top 10 markets, CBS channel, to this small town in rural West Alabama. And it was awesome. I loved it. I mean, I never thought twice about it. We lived on 10 acres. The cost of living was so low. We had fun, on Friday nights. I'd go with one of the crews and do some high school football. And if the weather was bad, I owned the radio station. I could do whatever I wanted to do. But Channel 6 came calling in 1989. And that's when I came back. And that's when Mike Royer went to 13 and I came back to 6. So the next question, Jay, tell us the sequence of events of getting out to Kansas.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Well, Channel 13 was such a wonderful opportunity. But, I was going to be working weekends the rest of my career because Jerry Tracy's still there. I mean, he's 31 years at Channel 13. And I knew that if I ever wanted to move on or move upward, I wasn't going to be able to do it at Channel 13. I knew Jerry was very happy there. People love him there. And so I knew that he was probably in for the long haul because he wasn't, he didn't feel like he needed to go up to bigger markets. He'd gotten settled in with his family there. I knew I had to leave. And Bob Barron, some people in the weather enterprise are probably familiar with this person's name. Well, Bob used to be the on-air meteorologist at Channel 31 WAAY, went to Tampa, then came back to Huntsville at WAFF, the NBC affiliate. And after the 89 tornado in Huntsville, he said there has to be a weather way for us to get weather data. So we started Barron Services, what we know today. Well, when Barron Services got so big that he wanted to do it full time and wanted to get away from the TV end, he walked away from the job up there to do Barron Services. And I go into work one day at Channel 13 and my voicemail light's blinking. And the first message is from Bob Barron Jr. saying, "Hey, my dad just left WAFF 48. Okay, I delete the message. The next message is from Gary Kelly, the news director at WAFF 48, going, "Hey, we got a job open up here. Give me a call." So that's how I wound up in Huntsville. And you want to talk about being in Huntsville at the right time. That's when we had cash flow through TV stations. We were infusing new technology. We were able to put in an awesome Doppler radar. I mean, it was a Radtech / Barron. I'm going to bore some people here, but a 250 kilowatt C-band. We located it perfectly within the DMA, so we had the lowest beam height over everything, including the city of Huntsville. And we had some awesome tech. And at that time, Bob showed back up part-time over at Channel 31. And you had Dan Satterfield, who used to work with James at Channel 6, then come up to the CBS Channel 19. And it was a fun weather war for several years up there. I want to talk about a hyper-competitive television market. Huntsville, Alabama was rocking and rolling in terms of severe coverage. My goodness. That commitment that all three stations had, I think, goes unmatched outside of the plains.
Really?
Yes. That was a nuts market. I mean, I know you're very competitive in Birmingham too, but for some reason, I just think it was more of a slugfest in Huntsville. I mean, the WDRM, a country radio station, an FM station, owned a Doppler radar. And they had Gerald Miller, the former MIC at Huntsville, as their on-staff meteorologist. How many radio stations own Doppler radar?
And you won some Emmys while you were there, didn't you, Jay?
I got lucky. I did pick up an Emmy as I was, my final year there before I moved out. So the WAFF in Huntsville was just a fantastic job. And, I hired Brad Travis, who's now the chief meteorologist there, and he's doing a wonderful job. But I went from there to WSMV in Nashville because the news director who contacted me lived halfway between Nashville and Huntsville. And he would watch us off air. And he said, "You know what? We really need to step up the game in terms of severe weather coverage." And I thought, that's great. We'll just kind of take the Huntsville model and we'll bring it up to Nashville. Well, as soon as I got in the door, I was a square peg in a round hole. I came up against an engineer and a management that just loved doing things the way they were. And I'm like, well, I thought this was the direction we're going. And plus, you got to remember Bill Hall, who was the chief weathercaster there. you had to equate Bill Hall with Willard Scott. That kind of love, a weather personality that people adored in Middle Tennessee. And it was never, and I knew this, it was never anybody's job to go up there and take. It was for him to gift. And I was going to promotion every day and say, hey, when are the promos coming out where Bill Hall's taking me fishing, where Bill Hall's putting his arm around me and telling me that, hey, I'm going to spend some more time with my grandkids. Please let Jay tell you about the weather. But, that stuff didn't pan out, and they re-signed. I knew I was in trouble. They re-signed Bill to a new contract. I'm like, so much for Bill retiring. And it wasn't too long after that, they were like, you know what? Bill just signed a new deal, so we don't need you. And from there, I wound up in Panama City Beach, Florida at WJHG. And you want to talk about a personal savior. This was Jason Kelly. He was the longtime chief at WJHG. And he had his his weekend person deployed to the Gulf. And his morning person had to leave. So he was doing every newscast at Channel 7. He was the weather department, the one person. So he called me and goes, hey, you want to do some freelance work? And I'm like, I sure do. So I wound up in Panama City Beach, Florida, working with Jason. And that was so much fun working with him. I knew Jason when he was a student at Mississippi State. I knew him when he was a rep for Barron Services and when he lived in Huntsville. And it was so much fun working for him. And I was just looking to get a rung back on the ladder. And it was great. And then I'm filling him for him one night, and the phone rings, and it's the general manager for Cake Television in Wichita, Kansas.
And so how did he run into you? Yeah.
He was calling Jason. He used to be the general manager. It's owned by the same company. Gray owned Channel 7 in Panama City that owns Cake. He used to be the GM down there, and he said, hey, I want to talk to Jason Kelly because I have some questions about radar. And I said, I think I can answer any question you have about television Doppler radar. And he goes, yeah, but Jason used to work for Barron. And I'm like, I think I know enough about Barron equipment that I can answer any question you want. And we had a great conversation. And he goes, you know what? I think we need to get more aggressive with weather. Who do you know that would like to come to Wichita? And I said, I got the perfect person. Brad Travis at WAFF. I actually set Brad Travis up with an interview at Cake in Wichita. And he decided, he liked Huntsville a lot, re-signed there. So my next phone call was back to the general manager at Cake and said, okay, I'll come interview. And he said, well, according to company policy, I didn't ask you to come here, so go to HR and tell them you want an interview. And then I wound up here. Talk about this is a pinball machine kind of career sometimes.
And how long have you been there, Jay?
I'm in my 14th year.
Wow.
It does not seem like I have been here 14 years, but the quality of life here, my wife and I are very thankful to be here, and we feel very, very fortunate to have the tenure that we have in this market now.
Yeah, and you, I guess you got to work in the same market with Dave Freeman and some other.
And that's pretty funny because, when Dave and I first met, I was in Birmingham and he was in Dayton, Ohio. He was at WHIO, and it was so funny. I mean, I'll tell you a good Dave Freeman story. Is when I finished the interview at Cake, they offered me the job during the interview, which is pretty rare in this business. Normally, you find out 6 months later when somebody finally calls you. So they had offered it to me. Well, I made the drive from Cake over to Exploration Place, which at that time was the hosted Dave's weather lab. And so I called Dave on the cell phone and I said, Dave, what's going on, buddy? And he goes, Jay, don't you know that I'm getting close to the show and I'm very busy now? And I said, well, I don't know the next time I'm going to be in the parking lot of Exploration Place is. And he was like, I'll send somebody to let you in. So I got a chance to go by and talk with Dave. And he was like, you're not going to take the Cake job, are you? And I'm like, who, me? And, and I tell you, it's been great. I still, in my mind's eye, I feel like I've been in Huntsville the longest of any stop on the career, but I'm in my 14th year here, and it just does not seem that long.
And so you've seen some big events in Kansas. I guess Greensburg's one of the biggest, Jay?
Greensburg is obviously top of mind, but I've also seen a lot of very big events that went over nothing but sunflowers and wheat fields that get ranked EF1, EF2, that if you look at the radar presentations, if they would have hit, if anything, any kind of town, they probably would have been EF4 or EF5. So the climatological tornado base here is kind of skewed by the fact that we have a lot of very violent tornadoes that don't impact people.
Well, it looks like when you look at tornado distributions in Kansas, Jay, I mean, it's like buckshot. They're scattered everywhere. There's no places immune in that state, it looks like to me.
No, but I tell you what, we really had, along with Oklahoma, we had a very interesting year this year. I mean, we normally start ramping up the tornado season in April. We didn't have a single tornado in April, not one. And then May 1st, we had an EF3.
I got to come and storm chase there in May of 2004 in the Harper County and I think Sumner County, maybe those tornadoes, Attica, down in that area. They were heading for Wichita. Were you there then?
Yeah, 04 would have been my first year here. And that was probably the same. Was that the same outbreak as what we called the Mulvane tornado, one that was southeast of town? We called it the Ajax tornado because it was so well lit. It was pure white. It was a very photogenic storm.
The description of the tornado sounds very familiar. I don't know about that town. There were two outbreaks within about a week of each other there, but it was an amazing tornado. And James Spann, who do you think the first person was I called when I saw that tornado in Kansas?
J.B. Elliott.
Absolutely. I called JB on my cell phone because they had invented them by then. And because I don't think JB ever saw a tornado in person, did he, James?
I don't think so. If he did, he didn't tell us. And he told us almost everything, I think.
But, Jay's right. That tornado was a very thin and eventually, became much, much bigger. But it was backlit by the setting sun. And the bottom half of it was a brilliant, bright white. And the top of it looked gray or whatever. It's a magnificent tornado. And I think there were about 7 more that afternoon that we saw. That was an amazing day. It was like the Super Bowl of tornadoes to me, Jay. After I did that, I never cared about chasing again.
Well, I'll tell you, if you ever get bored, either you or James, give me a yell. I'd be more than happy to embed you with a couple of guys that, work for us. Tony Lawback used to do stuff for the Discovery Channel. He's now on staff now here. He's now a meteorologist that's employed full-time by Cake. And I'd be more than happy to send you out because Cake Land is a very vast space and we have plenty of weather. If you want to come up for a blizzard, I can stick you in Colby in mid to late January and you can deal with the snow too.
Oh, that sounds like fun. So it's not just tornadoes in Kansas. You deal with a lot of other severe bad weather, not necessarily severe weather, but bad weather.
Oh yeah, in springtime, it is not uncommon for me to have a blizzard warning and a tornado watch simultaneously within the viewing area. And you got to remember, it's a very vast viewing area because the big 3 affiliates here are all multi-station networks. We're a network of television of 7 transmitters, 3 full power, 4 low power. So we go all the way to the Colorado state line. Denver is the next market to the west. And to put that in perspective for your listeners and viewers in the Southeast, imagine being Alan Seals at WKRG Channel 5 in Mobile and actively warning for Huntsville.
Mm-hmm. So how do you do it, Jay, on a big severe weather day? What station policies? How does it get dictated?
Satellite has thrown a wrench into this whole process. I can divide the state up into 5 big slices of pie. So let's say that there's a tornado approaching Goodland. We're Channel 4 KLBY there. Well, I can isolate Channel 4 KLBY and broadcast continuous coverage there. But the problem is, if you are a Dish or DirecTV customer, they are only providing the signal based out of Wichita. So now, and we have, the boss finally let me read the numbers. We have some counties in western Kansas that are now 95% satellite penetration. 95%. That means if I'm on Channel 4, I'm only reaching 5% of the homes via cable and off air because 95% of them are either on Dish or Direct, which means I have to then break into Cake in Wichita in order to feed those satellite viewers. So now if any life limb or property with any population center, even in western Kansas, is impacted, I have to blow out programming in Wichita, a 4 or 5 hour drive away to cover it. And, you can imagine the haterade when you're blowing out programming for something that's 30 minutes away. When it's a 4 or 5 hour drive, people still forget that we are the local ABC station for Goodland, Kansas also.
So what's the threshold for populated areas, Jay?
Okay. I will give a lot of credit to my management over the years, even though we've changed owners, we've changed general managers, we've changed news directors. Rather than a flow chart of if, then, now, it is here is the general consensus, here is the feeling, and the meteorologist on duty has the authority to make the call at any time. Doesn't mean they won't be called in the day after and say, take me through your calculus and how you came up with this, and you may get in trouble and you may not. But fortunately, I don't have this very hard, concrete line of when to and when not to.
That's good. That's really good. So, Jay, what's your take on the biggest challenges facing the industry?
How are we going to make money? I mean, the problem is we're making lots of money now for Facebook and for Twitter, but the more our content is consumed on these platforms, we're just honestly, I think we're slitting our own throats. I think the biggest mistake some of the consultants made was imagine a world. Let's jump in the Wayback Machine. When Twitter and Facebook came out, if some consultant somewhere would have said, you know what, let's leave social media to nothing but crackpot journalism and conspiracy theories, and so don't put your brand out there, then people would have never taken those sources as a legitimate channel. Unfortunately, we have legitimized the channel by providing quality content, but unfortunately, our microphone and megaphone is as big as the person who, the quintessential person living in the basement and doing, InfoWars or whatever. So we've unfortunately equalized a platform of stuff that is horrible and stuff that is very beneficial, and not everybody can separate the wheat from the chaff that consumes it.
That's going to become an increasingly important skill for people as we go on, or we're going to destroy ourselves, Jay.
Well, look at the polarization that we're going through. No offense, social media, I have yet to see a cogent discussion of anything politically based on social media. And all I do is see people creating deepening, echo chambers of their own thoughts rather than engaging discussions. And it just doesn't work on social media anyway. So if the way we're handling politics on social media and the fact that we just continue to spread out to the sides of the room, we're centrifuging society. And I think at some point there has to be a clarion call where we figure things out. If not, yes, we will be in trouble as a nation.
Well, that's a pretty important set of statements right there. But what else is the most important thing you want to tell an audience today when you talk to them, Jay?
I want to tell them that, television weather is still here and it still serves the public. And the goal of most television weather operations is accurate forecast, emergency weather in a timely manner, clearly communicated so people have the information they need to protect life, limb, and property.
So, Jay,
what do you tell a young person that wants to get in this business? So somebody's listening to this show and they're 18 and they're about to graduate from high school, want to do weather on television. Will they have a job when they get there?
You know what? They'll have a job, but I don't know what kind of job they're going to have, James. And I'm upfront with them and I say, listen, if you have a real passion to do this, do it. But keep in mind, your passion has to be tempered by the fact that you're probably not going to make as much as some of your other friends that go into other professions. If that doesn't bother you, that's fine. If you're going to need to relocate in several cities until maybe you find that job with the quality of life you like, that's fine. The number of television stations producing news, I think, will shrink in the future as the advertising pie continues to shrink up. I think a town the size of Wichita may have only 1 or 2 viable television stations doing news. A city the size of Birmingham, you may hang on to 2 or 3. But at some point, I think Darwinism takes over and the strong survive and the weak just realize it's not profitable to put on a newscast anymore. And also say just being a meteorologist doesn't mean you're on television. There's a lot of other facets to the science. So feel free to pursue the science. But if you're thinking that, you're going to retire in the, 4,000 square foot house and drive the Bentley to work every day working in TV, that I believe those days have passed.
That's what Bill does. He's over there in the super private sector. So a few more questions.
entrepreneur. He's just not doing the television thing. He's figured out how to monetize it, not be in front of a camera all the time. He's a smart man.
Jay, 1982, JB and other weather service people were telling me the same thing, that you were alluding to there. You may not make as much money, in this business, you may want to get out, but they didn't offer that alternative, because the only alternative in 1982 that was fairly foreseeable to me was government and the weather service. And, for that lack of good advice back then, I switched to a computer science degree.
And yes, the computer science degree has served you so well, has it not?
Well, not as much as I probably should have made it, because I ended up in the hotel business. So, there's a third level to the story there, which I can't complain about.
Selling weather information to hotels. But I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, hello.
Well, we did do that. That's for sure. It's so funny. I checked into a hotel the other day, and there was that silly AccuWeather fax that we did back in the early 1990s. And that hotel was still getting it. And I said, how much do you pay for this now? And they said, I think they forgot to bill us. I need to call Joel Myers and tell them they're forgetting to bill this hotel in Lawrence, Kansas, because it's still getting the AccuWeather forecast.
That's fantastic. But I mean, as long as, it's not about being on television in the future. I mean, sure, you'll be broadcasting, but I also think that as IDSS and decision support system with the National Weather Service, let's face it, that's where they're trending. One thing that blew me away, I hadn't been to an NWA meeting in a while because I had other staff that needed to, get the points to keep their seals current, is the first 2 days, how little science I was seeing presented versus all communication. Here's how emergency management worked with weather service. Here's how this worked with that. It was all about communication and not about the science of weather. And that tells me that as the weather service is more public facing with more IDSS, that I really think down the road there will be what the WCM position is now, that there may be an additional position where somebody, like me or James or somebody coming into the business will be the face of a WFO potentially and be broadcasting severe weather coverage live from the WFO.
Wow. That'll be the day, James fan.
Yeah, buddy. So
Sorry.
Oh boy. Wow.
Okay, now let's cut to the mumbo jumbo now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
Yeah. Cut the mumbo jumbo here. Never lived that down. So Jay, what's your advice again? Let's say they are 18 and they just let's say that their heart is set on doing media weather. What's your advice to them?
My advice number one is, obviously you got to learn about the science, but if you want to be a communicator and you want to be in front of the camera, in order to polish your performance, find the campus radio station, get on air. I know it's technically antiquated, but it's going to teach you how to ad lib. It will teach you theater of the mind. It will teach you how to converse in front of a microphone comfortably. And all of those skills, the world of ad lib, will transfer directly to television, because I don't know how many reporters we see starting out that they go to that live shot and 2 words come out of their mouth and then all I see is the top of their head and then they're staring at their script and their device. And I pull them aside and I said, you know what? If I walked up to you in the newsroom and said, what was your story today? You'd look at me and tell me. You wouldn't bury your head in your device and read from your text. Do the same thing when you're out live. Learn how to be comfortable in front of the camera. And I think radio is a lost art and teaches people how to think about what they're going to say. And it makes them smoother when they're on camera in front of the green screen.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the lack of radio jobs is hurting? I do. Radio is just a computer in a closet now. I grew up in a radio station when I was a kid. Now nobody does that anymore.
Well, even when you work for a radio station, you're not even physically in a studio anymore, and you're at home cutting liners to MP3 files and then shipping them off to the radio station you have a contract for. So all you're doing is reading, hey, that was Elton John. Hey, that was Electric Light. Hey, and then you're done. I mean, that's your work shift. You're right. That whole idea of live local radio with occasional live interaction, with the public, and that's all a lost art. So I know it's increasingly hard to, but then again, that shows you how long it's been since I've done anything with radio that, I'm a dinosaur too. I remember when you used to go in a room and it reeked of smoke and there was a microphone there and the microphone muff occasionally smelled of beer. And, there was an ashtray with cigarettes stabbed on it from the previous shift, and you had carts. Kids don't even know what a cart is anymore. It's all click and play.
I'm not going to tell radio
One of the
stories.
best shows ever here.
No, I will say that those radio days were magic. I made like $1, I don't know, 40 an hour or something to start with, but I would have paid them. And I was much an introvert. Now, understand, I was a kid. I needed to work. I had to work. And it was just a great place to work and to learn how to communicate and to come out of a shell and to kind of morph from being an introvert to more of an extrovert and dealing with people, nice people and mean people and strange people. And it's kind of a good preparation for a long career like this. And I did that for 5 years when I was a kid. And that was like more than a quarter of my life at the time. And again, unfortunately, those jobs just don't exist anymore. So Jay, let's go back to the watch warning process. Do you guys issue your own warnings by any chance?
We don't issue our own warnings in the fact that I won't get on television and say I am issuing a tornado warning. But will I get on air and say there's no tornado warning from the Weather Service, but given the environment in this radar indication, I think tornado potential is high and one could develop at any time? Sure.
Do you see in the future let me ask you this. Do you think there's hope that the weather enterprise can get back to presenting a simple, unified message during life-threatening weather like tornadoes and hurricanes?
Yes and no. You got to remember, I worked at a market at one period of time where I had a competition which did issue their own tornado warnings. It would say, I am issuing a tornado warning. So I've been there and done that in the past. And I think there's a way that you can value add to the National Weather Service's message. And when it comes to tornado warnings, 90% of the time, that's what you're doing. You're augmenting their message. But once in a blue moon, like here in the high plains, we'll have weak, brief landspout tornadoes, which are in the middle of nowhere, or EF0 at best, last seconds to minutes, and pose no threat to life, limb, or property. It poses zero impact. And depending on who's on shift, and depending on the experience level of that person on shift, occasionally you'll get a tornado warning for that occurrence. And to me, it is a public service to go on air and acknowledge the tornado warning, explain why it was issued, but then be honest and say this is a landspout EF0 tornado that is going to be over the middle of a sunflower field with no movement and poses no problem to life, limb, or property, and get off television.
Yeah. And again, I agree. We enhance what they do. We're starting to see some markets where stations are issuing their own warning. And my position is if you got a warning out, but the other guy doesn't have a warning, another guy's got one, and the fourth guy's got no warning, that creates confusion. Do you think it would go in that direction if everybody in your market did their own warnings?
Oh, would there be confusion? Yes. But honestly, what I fear is now that the National Weather Service has through policy decided to become more public facing with direct to Twitter, direct to Facebook. And let's face it, used to a meteorologist would throw some model data out 7 or 10 days in advance talking about a winter storm potential. Every now and then I'll see a similar posting from a WFO now kind of doing the same thing. So what's interesting is as they become more media-esque, they're falling into some of the same media-esque traps. And you're right, it's confusion. I hope it doesn't happen, but you and I both know that if the Weather Service becomes so public-facing that we feel we're losing market share to the Weather Service, that there will be management mandates in the future to issue warnings in order to be competitive with the Weather Service and to quote-unquote attempt to outperform the Weather Service. I fear that may happen.
How is the relationship in your market with the other TV stations and the Weather Service? Do you guys get along okay?
You know what? It's stellar. The 5 WFOs that we work with, we meet with, and I mean, you were early on, James, into what was at that point the Iowa Environmental Mesonet Chat, IEM Chat. You were an early adopter. You got it. We were early adopters here, but the Wichita office was an early adopter. The Topeka office was. Western Kansas did not buy in immediately. Dave Freeman and I decided, let's meet and have basically a chat session. So we brought in the meteorologist, Merrill Teller from KWCH, CBS. The Fox here doesn't have a newscast. And we invited the members from the other Weather Service offices, all 5. We all met in a room in Great Bend, Kansas. And that started the process of trying to talk them to get into IEM chat, which morphed into weather chat. And then we said, you know what, let's bring in the emergency managers. And now every year, the 5 WFOs, the emergency managers from Kansas, and the media, we all meet together yearly in Great Bend, Kansas for what has morphed into the integrated weather team. It started as an IEM chat meeting. We adopted the IWT umbrella. So we have a fantastic working relationship between the stations, between emergency management, and between the WFOs here.
Don't you think that's important? It seems like in some markets, the TV Mets won't even get in the same room with each other and just hate each other. And they won't get in the same room with the weather service. But don't you think that the face-to-face IWT meetings are productive? I think they're fantastic.
No, they're great because to me, the most important impact to the IWT is breaking down walls and barriers and eliminating misconceptions. You know, emergency managers will sometimes have kind of a misconception of our attitude in the media versus the weather service. And so this has been great for relationship building, where it has improved the flow of data during outbreaks within the chat room. And that's the key. So all of the partners, EM, weather service, media, all know what's going on in as near real time as possible, and it's extremely collaborative. It is disappointing that in some markets you hear about that the egos are so large, not only between the TV Mets, but sometimes between the media and the weather service, that it impedes that flow of collaboration. And that's one thing. And no offense, at a market this big as mine, if we didn't have the collaboration, we would be, just stand in front of a key wall, point at nothing with nothing to talk about except the radar data.
Wow. So what's your future, Jay? How long are you going to do this?
Well, I started the whole family thing a little later than most folks my age. So until they get out of the house, Daddy needs a job. So I need at least another decade doing this.
I'm just getting started. I'm old as dirt, but man, I honestly feel better at this age than I felt when I was 32 years old. And I don't know what it is, but we're empty nesters now. And I don't know what I'd do. I mean, I would like to travel some and understand I do want to retire with some quality of life left so we can do something like that. But I'm just getting started. And I just think there's a lot of work we need to do. Jay, you weren't down here for this 2011 situation, but that was kind of one of these life-changing type events where it's clear that we have some issues and we have some work to do, and physical science is not enough. We have to integrate these other disciplines into what we do as practitioners. And I want to help facilitate that because I don't want that kind of thing to happen. But looking back on your career, Jay, typically for people that have been in it for a long time like you're defined by 1 or 2 days on the job, working some big event. What are your defining days in your career?
Greensburg and Hurricane Andrew. And I hope this doesn't come off schmaltzy, but I actually felt some guilt over the 2011 outbreak. I'm here in my office watching the radar data and thinking I should have never left my job at WAFF. I was supposed to be in my home state doing my job on this day, and I'm not there. And I had to deal with some guilt from that. And I know this is going to sound cheesy. My parents still live in Birmingham. That morning, my parents live suburban Birmingham to the south. That morning, they had a probably little EF0, EF1 tornado nearby the house. And I told my dad, I said, listen, how long have I been doing this TV thing? He goes, I don't know, a long time. And I said, have I ever told you to take a day off work? And he said, no. And I said, well, today's the day. I want you after lunch, go home, hang out at the house, because they have a basement. And his office is in Tarrant City. And you know where what was the Tuscaloosa storm eventually dissipated. Was close enough for me to be happy that I told him to go home that day. And so I can't say that 2011 was defining for me because I wasn't there to cover it, but it sure as heck impacted me. But Greensburg, I felt really good about the job we did that day. We communicated effectively. We communicated directly. And if you talk to people at Greensburg, I know the ones that were watching me. Everybody has a remote. But I can tell you the ones that were watching me because they can quote me back verbatim what I said. I said, I haven't been here a long time, but you know that I'm no chicken little kind of guy. And this radar presentation is as bad as it gets, folks. And people that saw me that night quote that back to me. And everything worked. I mean, Mike Umscheid was money at Dodge City that night. Dave Freeman was doing his job. Merrill Teller was doing his job. The people of Southwest Kansas and Central Kansas were well served by the Weather Enterprise that night.
Is your coverage on YouTube, Jay, so we can watch that sometime?
Yes, I did put some of the coverage. Matt Makins and I did that coverage that night. Yes, it is on YouTube.
Okay. That'll be my pick of the week.
Right. And one thing you'll notice is, okay, that was in 2007. This was all jet black. There was no gray hair.
Hey, brother, at least you got some. You sure that's not a tope there? So listen, guys, what we're going to do is do things a little different here because we've got to do television, and I'm going to let you two guys go in a second. I'm going to roll the Tony Rice segment at the very end. But before we do that, let's quickly do Weather Roundup. And again, we're doing this on September 24th. And Jay, looks like things are quiet out in the Great Plains tonight, huh?
Yeah, the good thing we got going on is we have frontogenesis occurring across the western third of the state as we speak. We finally, it's amazing how fall has timed itself, at least the astronomical start of fall, with when nature is starting to provide us with more frequent fronts. I don't think we're going to see 90 plus again for the rest of the year. So frontogenesis is in the process. I'm looking at the surface map now. It looks like it's through Garden City, through Hill City, but not quite to Hayes and Dodge yet. That's going to sweep across Kansas during the day tomorrow. Wichita, where did we talk about today? 80 what? Let me check here. Where we go? 80, heck, what was it? 83 degrees. We'll be lucky to hit 76 tomorrow. We'll probably have frontal passage, I think, between 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Temperature will drop. Maybe a scattered shower or thunderstorm. I'm not really worried about convective stuff. Most of the lift's going to be on the backside of the front. And we're going to... God, I can't wait till Wednesday morning. We're going to wake up upper 40s, close to 50. So a nice little chill in the air here.
Yeah, it looks like that front might produce some severe weather over Chicago and Detroit and Cleveland, ultimately then the Northeast United States. And we were hoping down here, Bill, in the deep South that we're going to see that air that Jay's talking about. But just about the time you get hope for a big, deep trough and a big push of cool air, the models flip and the ridge holes. So what can you say? And I did say this on the air like Jay. I think we're done with 90s for the year. Now, again, there might be a 90 in Tuscaloosa one day, but I think for most people where we are, it'll be 80s from here on out and then ultimately cooling down. So that's kind of exciting. But it's also raining down here. We had some good rains today. Bill, I don't know if it rained much at your place, but we got soaked down here, which was good.
Yeah, we got 5,200s here, and my son's football game got called because of the lightning. So, it was very welcome. I hope it sets up again tomorrow and Wednesday, so we get at least close to 1.5 inches, 2 inches this week. I hope.
Hey, let me throw in real quickly about rainfall. We had, and this is so rare here, we had a very persistent north and northwest flow. Normally by the time you get into late June, July around here, we tend to kind of, cap off, get the quote unquote death ridge. Did not happen this year. Western Kansas started the summer in extreme drought. It is no longer in any form of drought. Wichita got up to extreme drought, and we're now in moderate drought. Catching up on rainfall during a summer, that don't happen around here, folks. So that was a really unusual summer we had in terms of we were having, 1 to 3 inch rainfall events during the peak of summer. That is rare stuff in this neck of the woods.
Wow.
That's awesome. Now, I was going to mention quickly the tropics. We got a series of little features out in the tropical Atlantic, and I don't think any of those are immediate bothers. We had a storm called Kirk, which degenerated to an open wave today, and the Hurricane Center has that with some decent chance of regenerating by the time it reaches the Windward Islands, but then most likely it fizzles in the Caribbean. We have subtropical storm Leslie, and then a feature north of there that might merge into kind of a cold core North Atlantic system. And really, the ghost of Florence is lurking off the Atlantic coast. You guys see that today? That thing's kind of just, this is like Ivan. Remember Ivan in 2004?
The same week.
It did did the whole loop and came back like a second time. I'm thinking, oh, brother. And that might create some wind and rain for the Outer Banks here a little later this week. But the Gulf of Mexico back in our world is fairly quiet. And, of course, the flooding is still severe in parts of the river flooding, I should say, in parts of the Carolinas. And, again, Aubrey might be busy working some stuff up there. She's in Harrisonburg, so we know that she's busy. All right, Jay, so before we wrap things up here and let you go, do you do social media much at all? You, by the way, you were channeling Kevin Selly. The words of Kevin Selly were flowing out of your mouth. I mean, you could not be a better Kevin on the social media talk. Do you dabble much in it at all on the social side?
I do. I'm no fool. I know it's a way I need to reach some demographics and part of the audience I'm not going to reach elsewhere. So absolutely, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I might not be as voracious as some people are, but no, I'm putting stuff out there daily. I'm on it. Yeah.
All right. So what's your Twitter handle so people can go, all of our creepers can go follow you?
My Twitter handle is @JPraterCBM, and my Facebook page is the same, JPraterCBM.
There you go. All right. Well, Jay, thanks. It was great talking with you. Great memories of the good old days back in Birmingham in the 80s and 90s. That was some good stuff. And please come back. And Bill, I'm going to let you go because what I'm going to do, I'm going to roll Tony's report and we're going to wrap it up. And I know, Bill, you got to go too. So, Jay, Bill, thank you guys. We'll see y'all next week.
No, James, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, let's roll the astronomy report. We'll come back with a few more odds and ends. We'll wrap this up as WeatherBrains rolls along.
All right, just finished a pod.
All right. Well, I know for you guys watching this live, you can't hear the audio. There's a weird audio routing problem in here, so sorry about that. That's the reason we kind of cut Bill and Jay early. So on that note, we're going to wrap this thing up. Weather Brains is typically done Monday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. Many people watch live.bigbrainsmedia.com, but we know most of you listen to the podcast version. And if you do, we love those iTunes reviews, good, bad, whatever. If you like the show, don't like the show, drop a note there and send us an email. I promise when Aubrey gets back, we'll do a quadruple email segment. We have had some very good emails. The email address, it's email@weatherbrains.com. We'll have show notes on the website, weatherbrains.com. Our social media accounts are there as well. So on behalf of the entire Weather Brains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Yeah, we had a weird audio routing problem here. I use a couple of virtual audio devices called Soundflower, and one of them just stopped working for some reason, and I don't know why. But that's a reason you can't hear the audio, and I could fix it, but I'd have to stop everything and restart it. And again, that we'll get producer JP to edit that on the show. So sorry you couldn't hear the audio segments. But no, Jay was he worked against me, a competitor at the NBC channel here for several years, and a great guy, and it's great to have him on the show this week. So I got to go see what's going on with our late news here. We got some format changes. So thank you guys for watching. Y'all have a great week. We'll see you next Monday night.